Welcome back to the space couch. Grab your blanket, your blue milk, whatever you've got, because we are recording this late at night with the galaxy nice and quiet, and it is the perfect time to mess with the Force and the timeline. Today we're asking something dangerous and a little bit beautiful. What if Anakin Skywalker walked into Palpatine's office already remembering Mortis, already remembering the moment he saw himself become Darth Vader, and by the will of the Force quietly decided, not this time? Before we begin this video, special thanks to our patrons, our voice actors, and everyone else who helps bring these wild Star Wars dreams to life. You know the drill. If you want a chance to swing a free lightsaber in the next giveaway, watch till the end, and I'll tell you exactly how you can win. For now, our story begins in a place that technically never happened, and yet shaped everything. Mortis. Anakin stands in the Chancellor's office, but in his mind, he is back in that impossible sky, on that floating monolith where time bends and the Force itself takes shape. He remembers the Father testing him, the Son whispering temptations, the daughter kneeling in quiet sacrifice. He remembers seizing them both in one impossible moment, bending light and dark together, proving why the Council ever called him the Chosen One. He remembers more. Fire licking at the Jedi Temple, clones turning their rifles on the masters they once saluted, younglings running and falling, Coruscant's skyline lit by betrayal instead of traffic lanes. He sees Padmé on Mustafar, reaching for him as the heat rises and his eyes burn yellow, and he hears the mechanical breath that will replace his own. In canon, the Father took that vision away. But what if he remembered all of it and chose differently? This is that timeline. This is the path where the memory comes back like a nightmare that refuses to fade, where every new vision of Padmé dying feels less like a mystery and more like a warning label on the dark side itself. Palpatine still smiles, still plays the kind old mentor, still says he can save her, but Anakin has already seen what that promise really costs. In part 1 of this complete timeline, we're going to walk with him from Mortis through the late Clone Wars and into the opening moves of Revenge of the Sith. We'll watch how one remembered prophecy test changes his trust in the Council, his bond with Obi-Wan, and the way he listens when the Force whispers instead of shouts. We'll set the board for a very different Order 66 in part 2, where Palpatine's perfect plan starts to crack. So whether you're a casual fan who just loves Anakin and Padmé, or a lore goblin who has Mortis screenshots saved on your phone, don't worry. We're going to respect canon, twist it carefully, and map out every emotional beat of a galaxy where Anakin looks at his future as Vader and says, "By the will of the Force, not this time." Welcome back to the temple. Channel housekeeping in an alternate galaxy. And in this timeline, that simple refusal is where everything starts to bend. So, welcome back, my loves, to the little corner of the Jedi Temple, where we break Star Wars on purpose, and then very gently put it back together. If you're new here, I'm the slightly sleep-deprived narrator of wild galactic timelines, the same voice that walked you through the universe where Anakin never turned on Coruscant, where Mace Windu struck Palpatine down, while Anakin stayed in the Council chamber, and the one where Ahsoka never left the Order and ended up as the chaotic, beloved aunt to Luke and Leia. If you survive those emotional roller coasters, you know how we do things here. Respect the story, twist the path. Before we begin this video's main descent into Mortis, let's pin down the question guiding everything. What if Anakin Skywalker never forgot Mortis? What if the Father's memory wipe failed, or cracked, or was undone by a vision years later, and Anakin walked into the final days of the Clone War, remembering exactly what he saw. Himself kneeling in black armor, Padmé dying, the temple burning, the Jedi falling, the galaxy drowning in the dark side under an emperor he once called friend. That is our divergence point. That is the fracture line running through this entire series. Our story begins here with part 1 of a complete timeline, and we're going to move fast but stay grounded. First, we'll return to Mortis itself, the father, the son, the daughter, and the moment Anakin proves he can command them both, balancing light and dark in a way no other Jedi or Sith ever has. Then we follow him back into the late Clone Wars, through his strained trust with the Council, his secret life with Padmé, and the slow tightening of Palpatine's net as Coruscant slides toward revenge of the Sith. Part 2 will pick up with Order 66, the fate of the Jedi, the Senate, and the shape of a new galactic order forged by a chosen one who actually knows what's coming. Now, quick temple housekeeping, because even alternate timelines need rent money. Thank you to the patrons who keep the holoprojectors running and the CAF flowing. You are the reason our own Jedi Archives droids can fact-check every obscure Mortis line at 3 a.m. Huge love to the artists painting visions of Anakin standing between the son and daughter, and to the voice actors bringing our council, our clones, and our very tired Obi-Wan to life. Behind the scenes, the editing crew are basically overworked temple caretakers, sweeping up continuity errors before you ever see them. Pattern interrupt time. Do you want a physical artifact from this timeline sitting on your shelf? Stay to the very end of part 1, because we're announcing a giveaway tied to Anakin's final choice in this universe. Whether he embraces the full weight of the Chosen One and steps beyond the Council, or lays it down and chooses a quieter life with Padmé and the twins. One lucky viewer will win a lore-packed Mortis art print and a custom lightsaber design based on the Anakin of this timeline. And yes, the hilt will reflect whether he truly balances the Force or not. So keep that question in the back of your mind as we head back to that impossible realm outside normal space, where time bends, the Force speaks clearly, and a young Jedi Knight watches his own fall play out like a nightmare he refuses, this time, to forget. Back to Mortis, the night the Chosen One saw Darth Vader. So welcome back, my loves, because our story begins again in the cold, impossible sky above Mortis, where a single Republic shuttle hangs in a place that is not really space and not really time, and 3 very tired Jedi have no idea they've just flown straight into the bloodstream of the Force itself. Mortis is not a planet the Council can chart, or a battlefield the clones can march on. It's a realm tied to the very fabric of the Force, where reality bends. Visions bleed into the present, and a day can feel like a lifetime while only moments pass in the wider galaxy. Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka are pulled here by a distress signal older than the Republic, and before they can even understand where they've landed, they're standing in front of a being who calls himself, simply, the Father. The Father is ancient and weary and terrifyingly calm, and he tells Anakin that this place is a test, not a duel, not an exam the Council can grade, but a trial of the Chosen One's soul. With him are his children, the daughter, all soft light and serenity, and the son, all angles and shadow and hunger. They are not just powerful Force users. They are the light side and the dark side given shape, and they pull at Anakin from both directions. Anakin is dragged into their conflict, and he is forced to choose, and then he refuses to choose at all. In the most important moment of that trilogy, He reaches out, commands the son and the daughter at the same time, and forces both embodiments of light and dark to their knees. For one heartbeat, he doesn't just touch balance. He enforces it, and the father looks at him with this mix of awe and dread, because the prophecy is no longer theory, it's standing in front of him in Jedi robes. But the real fracture comes when the father, desperate to keep his son from escaping Mortis and corrupting the galaxy, shows Anakin what that failure would look like. Time breaks. Fire and smoke and red blades fill Anakin's vision. He sees himself as Darth Vader, marching through the Jedi Temple, cutting down younglings, hunting Obi-Wan across burning worlds, kneeling to Palpatine as the Republic dies and the Empire rises. He sees Padmé's face fade, her hand slipping from his, her death tied to his choices. Anakin falls to his knees and he denies it. He screams that he would never, that he is a Jedi, that this cannot be his future. But the images keep coming, and the horror is that he recognizes the fear in his own eyes. In canon, the father sees that this knowledge is too much. If Anakin walks away with this vision intact, destiny might shatter him before it's fulfilled. So the father reaches into his mind and erases Mortis, wipes the tests, the balance, the Vader nightmare. And that blank space is exactly what lets Palpatine work. When the Chancellor whispers about saving Padmé, Anakin doesn't recognize the pattern. He thinks it's a lifeline instead of the first step into that vision. But what if that erasure fails, or only mostly works? What if the memory cracks and the Mortis vision lingers like a bad dream he can't quite explain? And then, at the worst possible moment on Coruscant, it comes back in perfect, agonizing clarity. That is the fault line of this timeline. And in the next section, we follow Anakin back to the temple, back to the council chambers, carrying a nightmare he refuses, this time, to obey. Rewinding the canon, from Mortis to the edge of revenge of the Sith. So, welcome back, my loves, because now we have to rewind the canon tape and watch everything from Mortis to the edge of revenge of the Sith play out again, only this time with that half-remembered nightmare humming under Anakin's skin like static. Our story begins the moment they leave that impossible world behind, and the galaxy pretends nothing happened, but the Force remembers. The war doesn't slow down for mystical visions. Anakin and Obi-Wan are thrown straight back into the grinder, and the battles get darker and messier. Umbara happens, with its shadow-drenched corridors and clone helmets glowing in the fog, and Anakin is ordered away just before Krell's betrayal detonates. He returns to a shaken 501st, hears what the Jedi General did, and thought, even if he doesn't say it out loud, that the Council is starting to lose itself, that the line between Jedi and monster is thinner than anyone wants to admit. On Coruscant, he's the Golden War hero, but inside the temple, the Council keeps him at arm's length, and every refusal of the title of Master lands like a quiet insult. Palpatine, of course, sees the opening. The Chancellor pulls Anakin closer, tells him he's the greatest Jedi of his generation, that the Council is jealous, that only he truly understands the weight Anakin carries. Dinners in the Senate apartment, private conversations in speeders over the city lights, little nudges toward the dark side wrapped in praise and concern, and then Ahsoka. The bombing of the Jedi Temple, the hunt through Coruscant's underbelly, the desperate chase to clear her name. Anakin believes her when almost no one else does, and he fights for her, and still he watches the Council turn their backs, watches her walk away from the Order in that silent courtyard. That moment cuts deeper than any lightsaber. He's told himself for years that the Jedi protect their own, that the code is worth the sacrifice. But now the person who felt most like his Padawan, his little sister, is gone because the Order failed her. From there, every campaign adds weight. The siege of Mandalore rages while he's pulled back to Coruscant, split from Ahsoka at the worst possible time. The war spirals toward its end, and Anakin is both indispensable and never fully trusted. He's the hero without the rank of master, the secret husband trying to be the perfect Jedi, while Padmé gently guides his hand to her stomach and whispers that she's pregnant. The galaxy cheers his victories, and in the Senate chamber, Palpatine's power is at its absolute peak. Emergency measures stacked on emergency measures until democracy is hanging by a thread. Through all of this, Anakin sleeps badly. Some nights he dreams of Padmé dying. Some nights of clone troopers turning their rifles on robed figures, of a temple burning against a red sky, and a masked figure breathing mechanically in the smoke. He wakes up sweating and tells himself it's just stress, just the war, nothing more. By the will of the Force, he thinks, these are only nightmares. But the Force knows better, and those images are waiting for him on Coruscant, ready to sharpen from dream into memory the moment everything starts to break. The weight on Anakin's shoulders, fear, love, and the edge of collapse. On Coruscant, all those images waiting in the dark finally find him. And my loves, this is where the pressure really starts to crush in. Our story begins this night not with a battle, but with a man who has fought too many already and is suddenly realizing the war inside his own mind is worse. By day, Anakin is the hero of the Republic. He walks into the council chambers and they give him a seat, but not the rank of master, and the insult sticks like a splinter under the skin. He's told to spy on Palpatine, the very chancellor who calls him my boy, and treats him like a favored son, and he's still expected to be the perfect Jedi general in a war that never ends. At the same time, Padmé is quietly holding her stomach in their apartment, their children growing in secret, and Anakin is trying to be a husband, a future father, a loyal Jedi, and Palpatine's favorite all at once. At night, the mask slips. He lies awake next to Padmé and counts her breaths, because his own are coming too fast and too shallow. And when she finally falls asleep, he gets up, pacing in the dark, bare feet on cold floor, hands shaking whenever his thoughts circle back to one image, Padmé dying in childbirth. It's his mother all over again, another desert, another helpless moment, and the guilt never really left. It just changed faces. He tells himself it's just stress, just the war, but his body doesn't believe him. And now the nightmares sharpen. They aren't just random flashes, they're Mortis bleeding back through. He sees red sabers crossing over a burning temple, clones in familiar blue and orange armor turning their rifles on Jedi he knows by name. And somewhere in the chaos, Padmé reaches out to him, fingers trembling, eyes wide, before she collapses just out of reach. Over it all, there's that distorted voice he heard in the father's vision, stretched and mechanized, calling him a name he swore he would never be, Vader. He wakes up gasping, the echo of that word rattling in his chest, and now the tension between what he wants and what he's sworn to be won't let him rest. He wants the rank of master, not just for pride, but for access, for the forbidden knowledge he thinks might save Padmé. He wants power, enough that no one he loves ever dies again. But he also wants to be the Jedi the Order believes he is, the man Obi-Wan thought he could be, and the gentle, steady partner Padmé deserves. So he keeps circling the same questions, like a ship caught in a gravity well. What decision do I make? What's the right choice? How far am I willing to go? He asks them in the council chambers, in the war room, in the quiet moments when Padmé is asleep and Coruscant hums outside their window. And every time the answers feel closer and more dangerous. Because now, by the will of the Force, Mortis is no longer a half-remembered dream. It's a warning replaying in his skull, and the next time those questions come up, the memory of exactly how he becomes Vader is going to offer him a path, one he may not be able to ignore. When the past breaks through, Anakin's Mortis memories return. Our story begins again in the quiet, and that's always when the Force speaks the loudest. Coruscant is wrapped in midnight. The Senate spire lights dimmed. Traffic streams like rivers of fire outside their window. And in the apartment Padmé insisted should feel like home, Anakin jolts upright in bed with a strangled gasp. Padmé is asleep in the next room, one hand on the curve of her stomach, breathing slow and steady, and Anakin sits alone in the dark. Sweat clings to his neck. His mechanical hand is locked in a fist, and the hum of speeders outside sounds like distant blaster fire. He's had these nightmares for weeks now. He's thought they were just fragments. Padmé dying, his arms empty, the Jedi failing him. But this time, something breaks. This time the dream doesn't fade, it sharpens. He swings his legs off the bed and just sits there, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor, and the memory hits like a hyperdrive jump. Mortis. Not as a haze, not as some half-remembered vision quest, but in brutal, perfect detail. The green sky, the towering monoliths, the father's calm, ancient eyes, as he told Anakin he was the chosen one. The son's voice, oily and hungry, promising power over life and death. The daughter's light, flaring against the dark side like a last sunrise. And then the worst part. He remembers what the father tried to take away. He sees himself kneeling before Palpatine, not as Anakin, but as something else, something broken, calling him master as the Jedi temple burns. He hears clone troopers gunning down children who trusted him. He feels the weight of black armor sealing around his body, the mask, the breath, the fire on Mustafar and Padmé's eyes wide with terror as his hand closes around her throat. It's all there, not symbolic, not vague, specific, exact, a future he already lived once in the currents of the Force. Anakin staggers to his feet and paces to the window. Panic spikes first. No, the father erased this, he promised. By the will of the Force, that knowledge was supposed to be gone. Then denial crashes in. Maybe it's just another nightmare. Maybe Mortis was never real. Maybe he's losing his mind like the Council always secretly feared. But the city keeps humming, and the Force doesn't let go. Slowly, chillingly, the pieces line up. The visions of Padmé's death. The whispers from Palpatine about powers some consider unnatural. The offer to teach him what the Jedi allegedly hide. Anakin realizes it's all the same path, the one the sun dangled in front of him, the one that ends with the suit, the mask, the Empire, and Padmé dying not from some random fate, but from his own choices, his own hands. He presses his palm against the transparasteel, watching the lights blur. "I've seen this before," he whispers, voice shaking. This time there is no father to wipe his mind clean, no reset button on destiny. Welcome back to the future, my loves. Anakin Skywalker remembers exactly how he becomes Vader. And now he has to decide if he'll walk into that office and prove the vision right. The Council, the Chancellor, and the Trap, reframing the coming crisis. So our story begins again in fire and metal over Coruscant. The invisible hand tears through the upper atmosphere. Anakin and Obi-Wan fight and crash and scramble, just like you remember, and the Battle of Coruscant rages around them. But inside Anakin's mind, there's another battlefield now, one that smells like Mortis rain and echoes with the sun's laughter. He cuts down battle droids, he flies half a ship, he saves the Chancellor, but he does it all with that vision of Vader burning behind his eyes. In the throne room, Dooku ignites his blades, and the choreography plays out almost beat for beat. Anakin and Obi-Wan pressed, Obi-Wan slammed unconscious, and then Anakin's sabers cross at Dooku's neck. Palpatine leans forward, voice low, hungry, and he tells Anakin to kill him. In canon, Anakin hesitates because it's not the Jedi way. Here, he hesitates because the line lands like an echo. He's heard this before. On Mortis, the sun told him to embrace his anger, to seize his destiny, to cut down those who stood in his way. Palpatine praises his power, calls him the greatest of the Jedi, hints that the Council is holding him back, and every word feels like a recycled script. Anakin's fingers tighten, not from temptation, but from recognition. Destiny, special power, a future only he can control. These are the sun's lines with a Coruscanti accent, and that realization sends a deeper chill through him than Dooku's death ever could. He still executes the count, but this time he's not just ashamed, he's taking mental notes. Back on Coruscant, the war heroes' welcome feels thin. The Council gathers. They talk about the Chancellor's emergency powers, about how long Palpatine has held on to them, and their suspicion grows just as it did before. But now, when Mace Windu's eyes narrow, when Yoda muses that the dark side clouds everything, Anakin doesn't just think they're being paranoid. Mortis told him the truth. A Sith Lord orchestrates this war, and the future where the Jedi burn has Palpatine's shadow stamped all over it. So when the Council asks him to spy on the Chancellor, we hit our pattern interrupt. In the original timeline, he explodes, feels betrayed, storms out. Here he still feels the sting, his pride flaring, because they don't trust him, they don't make him a master, they keep him at arm's length. But under the anger, there's this cold, awful agreement. They're right to be afraid. They're right to watch him. He walks out of the council chamber, cloak swirling, but instead of going straight to Palpatine to complain, he pauses in the empty hallway and just listens. The Force hums with tension, like Mortis all over again. He thinks of Padmé, of the vision of her death, of the Empire rising on his mechanical back. He knows Palpatine is the Nexus. He knows the Council is circling the truth. And he knows Padmé's fate is tied to whichever side wins this invisible tug-of-war. Standing between those doors, Anakin Skywalker is at a crossroads, my loves. And by the will of the Force, he has to choose which lie to break first. He just doesn't know how to expose the monster without becoming the monster he saw. A different kind of confession. Anakin opens up to Padmé. Our story begins in the quiet after the storm, and it's not in the council chambers or on a battlefield. It's in the soft glow of Padmé's apartment as Coruscant slips into dusk. Traffic streams past the windows like rivers of light. The war hums far away, and Anakin is standing there between the curtains and the city, armor off, glove off, but his shoulders are still wearing everything Mortis showed him. Padmé watches him for a long moment, because she's seen the brooding night before. But this is different, and you know she can tell. She crosses the room, the fabric of her gown whispering over the floor, and she calls his name once, softly, like she's afraid he might shatter if she's too loud. When he doesn't answer, when he just keeps staring at the Senate building like it's a tomb, she comes to stand beside him and simply says, "Anakin, tell me what's really haunting you." He wants to lie, he really does, because the last time he told anyone what he saw, the Force itself tried to take the memory away. But this is Padmé, and welcome back to the one place in the galaxy where he doesn't want to be the chosen one, he just wants to be her husband. So he starts with the part he knows she'll understand. He told her about nightmares once, now he admits they never stopped. He says he sees her dying in childbirth, hears her calling his name, feels his own rage tearing everything apart. The words come out rough, but he doesn't stop there this time. Anakin swallows, looks down at his mechanical hand, and then he adds the piece Mortis burned into his mind. He tells her he's seen Jedi hunted like animals, the temple in flames, clones turning their rifles on masters they once saluted. He talks about the Republic twisting, slowly, horribly, into an empire under one shadow. And in every vision he is there, not as a savior, but as the weapon. He doesn't say the word Vader, but the way he says monster makes Padmé's breath hitch. Padmé listens, and Mai loves. She does what she always does, in the best way. She doesn't dismiss him, she doesn't panic. She takes his hand, flesh and metal, and reminds him that the Jedi are not blind, that the Council is wary of Palpatine, that the Senate can still correct its course because people like Bail and Mon Mothma still fight. But she also admits the war has changed everything, that fear is everywhere, that democracies don't just fall in one day, they erode. She tells him their love is not a weakness unless he lets it be used against him. And that's the knife twist, because on Mortis he saw exactly that. Anakin closes his eyes and finally says it out loud. In the vision, it's his terror of losing her that opens the door to the dark side, that turns him into the blade that cuts down the Jedi and chains the galaxy. He thought power would save her, and instead it killed everything. This time, he vows, almost in a whisper, he will not let fear make his choices for him. He will trust the Force even if it asks him to walk through fire. Padmé, with tears she refuses to let fall, guides his trembling hand to her stomach. She doesn't say children yet, but he feels the faintest stirring in the Force, like a promise. She tells him they're not just surviving this war, they're deciding what kind of galaxy their child will inherit, and that means making the right choices, not the easy ones. For a heartbeat, Anakin feels both the son's darkness and the daughter's light, hovering over that tiny spark of life, and by the will of the Force, he understands what's really at stake. Outside, Coruscant's lights flicker on one by one, and Anakin realizes that if his visions are true, the first Jedi those lights will go out for might be him. But who moves first, him or Palpatine? The catalyst returns. Ahsoka, Obi-Wan, and a new kind of support. Anakin stands at the window, Coruscant burning in miniature below, and that thought won't leave him. If the first Jedi light to go out might be his, then he does not have time to be alone. The old Mortis certainty presses in on him again, that feeling of being at the center of some impossible balance, and instead of turning toward the Senate Tower and Palpatine's office, he turns towards something else, a secure frequency, a familiar code, a girl who walked away from the Jedi, but never from him. He keys in Ahsoka's channel. There's static, then her hollow shimmers to life, armor scuffed from Mandalore, eyes sharp and tired and so very real. For a second, he just stares, because on Mortis he saw her die. He saw himself kneel in black armor over the ashes of everything, and now here she is, breathing and waiting and saying, "Master, is everything okay?" He could lie, and for once he doesn't. Anakin told her more with a look than he ever told the council with a speech. He says he's been seeing things in the Force, that he saw himself hunting Jedi through these very halls, that the Chancellor keeps circling him like a Nexu that smells blood. He doesn't say Vader, he doesn't say younglings, but the way his voice cracks when he says, "I'm afraid of becoming something I hate," tells her enough. Ahsoka listens, and she doesn't flinch. She thought the council failed her, and she still does. But this is Anakin. This is the man who believed her when no one else did. And she trusts his heart more than any title. She tells him that the Force showed her shadows too on Mandalore, that Maul named Palpatine as the spider in the web, and that if Anakin feels hunted, he probably is. She urges him to remember Mortis, even if she doesn't know the name, to remember that he once held light and dark in his hands and chose compassion. She says, "You don't have to face this alone. If the Chancellor moves against you or the Jedi, you call me. You call Rex. We've got your back, Sky Guy." That offer lands like a lifeline. The old story in his head, the one that whispered, "Only Palpatine understands you," starts to crack. By the will of the Force, another story slips in. He is not alone. Not if he chooses not to be. Later, in a quieter corridor, Obi-Wan finds him. Our story begins a little differently this time, my loves, because Kenobi doesn't just trade war reports and mission updates. He stops, studies Anakin's face, and asks the one question no one on the council thinks to ask. What are you afraid of? Anakin almost tells him everything. The father, the son, the daughter, the vision of himself in black armor, igniting a red blade over Jedi he once called friends. He almost confesses that on some impossible world outside time, he saw his own fall play out frame by frame, and that now those echoes are starting again. But the old habits are strong, and the words stick. Even so, Obi-Wan feels it, like a storm behind a closed door. He tells Anakin that the council may doubt, the Senate may panic, but he never stopped believing in him as the chosen one. Not once. Not even when Ahsoka left. Not even when the war dragged them both through the mud. He says, "Whatever you're facing, you will not face it alone. I give you my word." And now, the pattern is different. Instead of a single red thread pulling him toward the Chancellor's promises, Anakin feels 3 bright lines anchoring him in place. Padmé in their apartment, Ahsoka out on the rim with Rex, Obi-Wan in the next gunship over. The dark side still whispers, the Mortis vision still burns, but the idea that only Palpatine can save him is no longer the only story in his mind. For the first time since Mortis, Anakin truly considers a third path. Not surrendering to fate, not running from it, but meeting it surrounded by the people who refuse to let him fall. The question now isn't whether he'll stand alone against the storm. It's what happens when the storm finally hits, and he's ready for it. Mortis as a moral compass. Anakin reinterprets the prophecy. And this is where everything slows down. The storm is coming, but Anakin doesn't move yet. Instead, he does something that the Anakin of the main timeline almost never does. He sits, alone in the council chamber, Coruscant's traffic a distant glow below. Anakin folds his legs, rests his hands on his knees, and closes his eyes. And for a heartbeat, the stillness feels exactly like Mortis. Not the chaos of the sun's mountain or the battlefield with the daughter, but that quiet courtyard where the father watched him with sad, ancient eyes. Our story begins again inside his mind, where those memories are no longer fog, but crystal. He breathes in, and instead of chasing the visions away, he calls them closer. He remembers standing between the son and the daughter, their power raging like twin storms, and how the father told him that his strength wasn't meant to crush them, but to hold them together. Not domination, balance. Fear in one hand, compassion in the other, and the force flowing through the center. On Mortis, he controlled them both at once, and now he finally understands what that meant. The father didn't just show him a prophecy carved in stone. He showed Anakin the ugliest possible version of himself, the future where he clung to everything so hard that he broke it. Padmé dying, the Jedi burning, the mask, the breathing, the galaxy chained to his grief. That wasn't destiny, Anakin realizes. That was a warning about what happens when he refuses to let go. And the conflict inside him finally gets names. On one side is Palpatine, the kindly chancellor who promised secrets the Jedi were too afraid to teach. Power over death itself. A way to save Padmé if Anakin will just trust him. On the other side is the Jedi Order, tired and arrogant and often wrong, but still reaching for the light, still trying to listen when the Force whispers. Above both of them, deeper than both of them, is something else. The will of the Force itself, the current he touched on Mortis that didn't belong to any council or senate. Pattern interrupt. What if the Force isn't asking him to be a hero who wins everything, but a guardian who accepts that not everything can be won? Before we begin this video's next spiral into politics and war, Anakin quietly sets a new principle in his heart. Maybe the will of the Force isn't asking him to save Padmé at any cost. Maybe it's asking him to love her without trying to own her future, to accept that some losses are part of balance, and that trying to cheat death is exactly what shatters everything he's sworn to protect. He opens his eyes. The chamber is the same, but he isn't. By the will of the Force, he makes a vow that no one hears. He will still fight for Padmé, for the Republic, for their child. He will still do everything he can as a Jedi and as Anakin Skywalker, but he will not trade the entire galaxy's future for the illusion of control over death. Not this time, my loves. And when the storm finally hits, that choice will change everything. The opera scene, rewritten, Sidious meets a different Anakin. Our story begins again, not in a war room or a battlefield, but in velvet darkness and strange music. The galaxy's opera house glows over Coruscant, and Anakin walks its polished corridors like a man replaying a nightmare he can't quite wake up from. Mortis is in his head, the father's calm eyes, the son's outstretched hand, his own voice screaming no as the mask locks into place. He steps into the Chancellor's box and the scene is the same, but he isn't. Palpatine turns, that practiced warmth on his face, and says Anakin's name like a benediction, like he's the only one who truly understands him. Anakin sits, but he doesn't relax. The Force hums low and warning in his bones, and in the shifting lights of the performance, he almost sees the sun instead, pale and smiling, offering him power if he'll just surrender. They make small talk, they watch the dancers and the strange water forms, and then Palpatine leans in. He starts the story you and I know by heart. Did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? In canon, this is the hook. But here, my loves, Anakin hears something else. Another master who tried to control life and death. Another apprentice who killed him. The father, the son, the broken balance of Mortis, all wrapped in a different name. As Palpatine talks about manipulating the midichlorians, about stopping people from dying, Anakin's chest tightens, but he remembers the daughter's sacrifice and the way the father warned him. Control is not balance. He thinks of Padmé, of course he does, But he also thinks of that vision of himself marching on the temple, of younglings screaming, of Obi-Wan whispering, "You were my brother," over fire. This time he doesn't just swallow the story. He probes. But, Chancellor, did it work? Cheating death? Did Plagueis actually save anyone? Or did he just lose himself? The question lands like a thrown saber. Palpatine's eyes flicker just for a heartbeat before he smooths it over and tells Anakin that the dark side is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural. And that line hits Anakin like a Force vision, because he's heard it before, on Mortis, in that twisted future where he kneels, where a hooded figure promises him power beyond any Jedi. The wording isn't exact, but the feeling is. The trap is the same, the offer is the same. Only this, Anakin remembers how that path ends. He watches Palpatine's face now, not as a grateful friend, but like a Jedi, watching a Sith he can't quite prove. "If you know this power," Anakin asks quietly, "can you show me someone you saved?" Another flicker, another almost smile, another non-answer wrapped in flattery and half-truths. By the time he stands to leave, he's not desperate and hooked. He's thoughtful and unsettled. He wants Padmé saved. He wants his child safe. But Mortis echoes through him like a warning bell. If this is the only way to save her, then it can't be the right way. He tells himself that over and over as he steps back into the Coruscant night. But as the city roars below and the war grinds on above, one question won't leave him alone. And by the will of the Force, it's the question that will decide everything. If not this way, then how? The Council's test. Anakin, spy, or seer. Our story begins again in that familiar circular room, but the air feels different now. The war drums outside Coruscant haven't changed. The chairs of the Jedi Council haven't moved, but Anakin Skywalker walks in carrying something no one else in that chamber remembers. Mortis, and the future he refused to accept. He stands in the center as the council debates, and the moment plays out almost the same. They praise his heroics, they acknowledge his bond with Palpatine, and then they deny him the rank of master. The words still sting, but instead of exploding with hurt pride, Anakin feels the echo of the father's voice, the son's laughter, the daughter's sacrifice, all braided together in the Force like a warning. He swallows, and when Mace tells him they want him to report on the Chancellor, something in him finally snaps. But it isn't just ego anymore. "Masters," he says, and his voice is tight but steady. "You told me to be mindful of my visions. I have been, and what I've seen isn't just about Padmé." The room shifts. Obi-Wan's eyes narrow. Yoda leans forward. The other Jedi glance between them, because this is not the script they thought he would follow. Anakin continues, choosing each word like it might decide a galaxy. "I've seen the Republic fall under a Sith Lord. I've seen Jedi temples burning. I've seen myself serving that darkness, and every time, Palpatine is at the center of it. By the will of the Force, the Council actually goes silent. Yoda feels the tremor. Obi-Wan remembers Geonosis and Camino, and every time Palpatine has pushed Anakin forward. They know the Force can show true things, and Mortis hums around Anakin like static. But Mace Windu's jaw tightens, because he also knows fear can twist visions. And this young knight is already tangled in attachment and war and a lifetime of being told he is the chosen one. Yoda asks, slow and careful, if these glimpses are fate or warning. Obi-Wan adds that the future is always in motion. Anakin hears himself answer that Mortis showed him what happens when he runs from the truth and when he tries to control it, and both paths end in darkness. He doesn't say, "I saw Darth Vader," but the weight of it is there. Are these visions fixed destiny, or are they the galaxy's fire alarm, screaming at the Jedi to change before it's too late? Mace pushes back. He questions whether Anakin's closeness to Palpatine, his fear for Padmé, his anger at being denied master, are clouding his connection to the Force. He argues that the code exists precisely so Jedi don't confuse personal terror with prophecy. He doesn't dismiss Anakin outright, but he doesn't bow to him either, and that tension hangs between them like a drawn blade. In the end, the Council chooses the middle path. They agree Palpatine must be watched more closely, that Anakin's visions cannot be ignored, but they refuse to act on them as absolute destiny. They will investigate, they will prepare, but they will not leap. Anakin bows because he is still a Jedi, and he walks out knowing something terrible. The Council has heard him, and it still might not be enough. And as the doors close behind him, my loves, another question rises to meet him in the corridor light. If the Council moves too slowly, who will move fast enough to stop the future he's seen? Trust, betrayal, and the edge of the blade. Anakin's final temptation builds the doors of the Council chamber seal behind him, and the sound echoes, long and hollow, in Anakin's chest. The answer to that question in the corridor light doesn't come as words, it comes as a feeling, like the galaxy itself is starting to hold its breath. Out there, armies are still marching, worlds are still burning, but here on Coruscant, in these last days, everything is narrowing to a single point. While the Council debates and hesitates, the war surges toward its finale. Grievous vanishes to Utapau, the holomaps in the war room shift, and Obi-Wan is already packing for another impossible mission, another goodbye. Star destroyers slide through hyperspace. The droids tighten their lines, and in the Senate, Palpatine calmly folds more emergency powers into his hands like it's just another boring committee vote and not the end of the Republic. Inside the temple, Anakin walks alone. Clones march in perfect formation down gleaming corridors. Younglings laugh and train with practiced sabers that hum harmlessly. Masters sit in quiet council, all that serenity and discipline layered over a future he has already seen torn apart. He passes the training rooms, and Mortis rises up in his mind, unbidden. The father's island, the son's shadow, the sound of his own mechanical breathing as blue sabers fall around him. He stops at a balcony and looks down at the clone battalions drilling in the courtyard, and for a second he sees it overlaid. The same troopers, helmets turned, rifles raised, the temple on fire. He knows, my loves. He knows he is meant to be the blade that cuts this place down. And every step he takes inside these halls feels like walking along the edge of that blade. Palpatine feels it too, and he sharpens it. Private meetings become more frequent. The Chancellor's office dim and intimate. Coruscant's traffic a distant glow behind him. He leans in, voice low, asking if the Jedi have truly told Anakin everything, wondering aloud if perhaps the Council is plotting a coup, if they intend to move against the Senate, against democracy itself. He praises Anakin's insight, calls him the only Jedi wise enough, strong enough to see what's really happening. Anakin pushes back because Mortis is burned into him now. He hears the father warning that the dark side leads only to ruin. He remembers the son's promise of power and the flash of himself as Vader kneeling before this very man. But then he thinks of Padmé, of her hand on his cheek, of the vision of her dying, and the terror hits like a wave. The Council does not trust him. They withhold the rank of master. They send Obi-Wan away, And in that bitterness, the old temptation whispers that maybe the dark side is the only way to change anything. Nights blur. He meditates and sees twin futures, one in Jedi robes, one in black armor, and the line between them is a single choice in a single office. He paces the temple, torn between the will of the Force and the will of his fear. Then the call comes. Obi-Wan is leaving for Utapau. Anakin stands at a high viewport as the cruiser lifts from the pad, Obi-Wan's tiny shuttle peeling away and angling toward the stars. He remembers this exact moment from his vision. He remembers that once Obi-Wan leaves, everything falls apart. His hand curls against the transparent steel, knuckles white, as he asks himself the question that will define this entire timeline. When the moment comes, will he walk into Palpatine's office, or will he refuse the path that makes him Vader? And as that ship becomes a speck of light, the Force around him shivers, as if waiting to see which way Anakin Skywalker will break. The reveal. Anakin walks into the Chancellor's office with eyes open. The Force around him shivers, and Anakin feels it echo in his bones as Coruscant's night deepens outside the Council spire. Our story begins this time not with starships and heroics, my loves, but with footsteps. Mace Windu and 3 Jedi Masters stride toward the Chancellor's office, cloaks billowing, while Anakin paces the empty council chamber like a caged Nexu, every circuit of the room dragging Mortis back into focus. He stops by the wide window, fingers pressed to the transparent steel, and Padmé's face rises in his mind, pale and breathless, reaching for him from that nightmare of a future. Behind her, like a second shadow, he sees the son's smile and hears the father's weary voice, the one that told him he was the only one who could bring balance. He thought he could ignore it, bury it under duty and war and the Chancellor's praise. But tonight, the Force refuses to let him look away. The vision hits harder than before. Anakin doesn't just see flashes now. Mortis crystallizes. He sees himself kneeling in this very city, in that very office, lightsaber blazing, begging Palpatine for the power to save Padmé. He sees Mace Windu's blade at the Chancellor's throat, the crackle of lightning, and then his own hand cutting through the air, cutting through Windu, and everything after that is fire. The temple burning, younglings screaming, clones marching under a new empire, his own breath, mechanical and hollow. This is the fork in the road the father showed him, and for the first time, he remembers every frame. Pattern interrupt. He laughs. A short, shocked sound in the silent chamber, because suddenly it's so obvious. If he walks into that office as the man from the vision, everything the father warned him about comes true. But he doesn't have to be that man. By the will of the Force, he realizes, this is not a prophecy to obey. It's a test to break. Anakin turns from the window, cloak swirling, and strides for the door. He isn't running to save Palpatine anymore. He's going to confront the one person who has been quietly arranging every piece on the board, the one constant presence in every nightmare, the kindly old man who knew too much about the dark side and smiled too easily when the Jedi stumbled. As he races through the corridors, his thoughts are a storm. He remembers Mortis, how he bent the son and daughter to his will for a heartbeat, how the father erased that memory because it was too much knowledge too soon. Now the knowledge is back, and Anakin feels the currents of the future trying to drag him, but he plants his feet in the moment. He thinks of Ahsoka, of Obi-Wan, of Padmé, hand on her stomach, trusting him. He reaches the Chancellor's door earlier than in canon, and the sound hits him first. The crack of lightning, the roar of straining metal, the unmistakable hum of multiple lightsabers. Anakin steps through the partially open door and freezes just inside the threshold, hidden for a heartbeat. He sees it all. Aegon Kola and Saesi Teen already fallen, Kit Fisto staggering back. And at the center, Palpatine, no, Sidious, twisted by hatred, face contorted, yellow eyes blazing, as he hurls himself at Windu with a ferocity no kindly leader should possess. There's no mask now, no gentle grandfatherly smile, just the dark side, naked and ravenous. Welcome back, Anakin thinks bitterly, to the future you swore you'd never live. He walks forward at last, slow and deliberate, lightsaber unlit in his hand. Windu doesn't see him yet. Sidious does. The Sith's gaze snaps to him for a fraction of a second, and in that instant, Anakin doesn't look like a confused apprentice torn between loyalties. He looks like the chosen one who has already seen where this path leads, and has come here to break it. Dialogue at the edge. Anakin, Windu, and Sidious debate the future. Olo, it's hello there, my loves. Welcome back to the edge of the Chancellor's office, where destiny is about to argue with itself. Our story begins in that frozen heartbeat after lightning meets violet light. Windu is braced, teeth clenched, saber humming inches from Palpatine's twisted face. The Chancellor is playing weak, voice cracking, and Anakin steps into the doorway, like a verdict the Force has been waiting to deliver. Master Windu, Anakin says, and his voice is calmer than either of them expects. Before we begin this video in our heads where you execute the Chancellor and call it justice, listen to me. Windu doesn't lower his blade, but he shifts, just enough to see Anakin. Palpatine's eyes glitter, because he thought he knew this moment. He thought fear would drag Anakin to his side, but Anakin has already seen this room burn. I've been here before, Anakin continues, walking closer, lightsaber still unlit in his hand, not just in dreams. On Mortis, the Father showed me what happens if I choose wrong. I saw the Jedi Temple on fire. I saw clones gunning down younglings. I saw the Republic twisted into an empire, and I was standing right there. He nods at the window, at the Senate beyond. Wearing black armor, a mask, a monster named Vader, serving a Sith Lord in this very office. The word Vader hangs between them like a blade. Windu's eyes narrow. Palpatine's lips twitch, just for a second, because the name is his. A secret plan dragged into the light. Sidious recovers fast. Then you see Anakin, he wheezes, seizing the opening. That future only comes to pass if the Jedi betray the Republic. If Master Windu murders me here, the Senate will fall to fear, the Council will seize control, and you will be forced to defend peace by any means. They will fear your power, not mine. He leans into the performance, voice silk and poison. I told you, the Jedi were plotting to overthrow the Senate. This is the proof. Stop him now, and together we can prevent that empire you saw. Anakin looks from one to the other, and the room slows. By the will of the Force, Mortis is suddenly not a nightmare but a map. You're both afraid, he says softly. You, of losing power. He nods at Palpatine. And you, Master, of what happens if you hesitate again. For the first time, Windu flinches. The storm outside flashes across his face and he looks older, tired, human. We've sensed darkness around him for years, Windu admits, voice low. The Council thought we could watch, contain, outmaneuver him. We hesitated. That may be why your visions exist at all, Skywalker. Not a fixed script. A warning. Anakin hears the honesty, and it lands heavier than any order. Mortis, the father, the son, the daughter, all of it was about balance, not control, and he realizes no one in this room truly trusts the Force yet. Windu tightens his grip. He's too dangerous to be left alive. Anakin steps in, not with a strike, but with an open palm, gently pushing Windu's saber hand down. The pattern shatters. Palpatine's eyes widen because this isn't the script. No, Anakin says. He's too dangerous to die in the dark. Chancellor Palpatine, you will stand down. You will submit to a public trial. No more shadows. No more secrets. We end this in the light. And just like that, the future has to rewrite itself around a choice no one thought Anakin would make. Choosing the light in the darkest room. Anakin's new decision. The room freezes around that sentence. Lightning scars still burn across the walls. Transparasteel lies in glittering shards. And Windu's amethyst blade hums a steady, lethal line just under Palpatine's chin. Outside, you can almost hear distant boots and turbo lifts as clones and Senate guards race toward a crisis they don't understand. But in here, the galaxy holds its breath. Palpatine's eyes track from the purple blade to Anakin, and for a heartbeat he tries to slip the mask back on. The frail old man, the grateful Chancellor, but Anakin doesn't move. Our story begins, my loves, with a different kind of bravery. He takes a step closer, saber still lit but low, and he actually explains himself, because Mortis taught him what happens when he lets fear do the talking. If we kill you like this, Anakin says, voice rough but clear, in the dark, with no trial, no Senate. That's the future I saw. Jedi as executioners, the Republic losing faith, worlds turning to anyone who promises order. That's how a Sith empire rises from the ashes. That's how I become the monster you want me to be. Windu flicks a glance at him, surprised that Skywalker is saying the quiet part out loud, that he's thinking not just about the Council, but about the story the galaxy will tell tomorrow. Anakin goes on anyway. He tells them he's seen legions of white armor turn on Jedi. He's seen Padmé die on a cold landing pad. He's seen himself kneel in front of a throne of fire. And all of it started with small justifications like this one. The word trial is the last straw. Palpatine drops the act. His face twists, the kindly lines carving into something ancient and hateful. And he roars as a new wave of blue lightning explodes from his fingers. It's not a plea this time, it's punishment. He angles it, vicious and precise, not at Anakin, but at Windu, trying to force the same impossible equation. Strike Sidious down to save a master, or watch Mace die and lose the only Jedi who's ever truly scared him. Before we begin this video, you know how that goes in canon. But by the will of the Force, Anakin remembers Mortis. He remembers standing between the son and the daughter, feeling light and dark crash through him without drowning. He doesn't choose one side of the binary. He steps into it. He surges forward, blade up, teeth gritted. The lightning slams into his saber and into him, burning along his arms. But instead of letting rage take over or fear make him freeze, he breathes. He pushes back with every ounce of fierce protectiveness he has for Padmé and for the Jedi, and he tempers it with the compassion the daughter showed him when she gave her life. Aggression and mercy, perfectly balanced for once. With a shout, he twists his wrist, redirects the energy just enough to stagger Palpatine, and uses the opening. Anakin's free hand lashes out, not to kill, but to rip the saber from Sidious's grasp and hurl it away. Windu recovers, steps in, and together they pin the Sith Lord with crossed blades at his throat. Palpatine lies there, stunned, smoking, but alive. Windu's chest heaves. Anakin is shaking, breath ragged, but his eyes are clear and calm. He knows, in this tiny, fragile moment, that he has just stepped off the path to Vader. But as sirens wail closer and the Force ripples with panic and confusion across Coruscant, Anakin also knows something else. Capturing Darth Sidious in the light might be harder for the galaxy to survive than killing him in the dark. And the real war for its soul is only just beginning. Shockwaves through the galaxy. Immediate consequences of a surviving Sidious shockwaves hit the galaxy before the smoke in Palpatine's office even clears. Coruscant's sirens scream, traffic locks up in the sky lanes, and emergency channels across the holonet all light with the same impossible phrase: the Supreme Chancellor has been arrested as a Sith. In the Senate district, riot barriers slam into place, and terrified aides run in every direction, clutching data pads and screaming about constitutional crisis and succession, and no one knows who is actually in charge. In the barracks, clone officers stare at garbled priority codes, because the contingency tree that should flow cleanly from Order 66 is stuttering, half awake, like a nightmare that can't quite decide if it's real yet. Some units receive the first encrypted pulse and their chips itch, a cold pressure at the base of the skull telling them the Jedi are traitors. But the follow-up authorization never comes. Commanders blink, hands hovering over blasters they suddenly don't remember drawing. Rex looks at his men, looks at the temple on the horizon, and slowly orders safeties back on. Inside the temple, the council chambers feel smaller than they have in years. Masters are already on their feet, dispatching strike teams, locking down hangars, sealing archives. Younglings are herded away from the windows as gunships in Republic livery circle the spires, and every Jedi in the building feels the same jagged question in the Force. What if this is the moment the dark side has been planning for? And then the doors open and Anakin Skywalker walks in. Not in black armor, not with yellow eyes, not with a 501 synced behind him, and a blade meant for the children. He walks in as the Jedi who helped bring down a Sith Lord Chancellor. His tunics are scorched, his hair is a mess. He smells like ozone and burned carpet, and every youngling in the hallway just stops and stares. This is the hero from the holonet, but different, quieter somehow. Because inside, Anakin is exhausted. His muscles shake, his mind buzzes, but under it all there is this strange, fragile peace. That crushing Mortis vision of marching on the temple, of Padmé dying as he becomes Vader, has always been a chain around his heart. Now, by the will of the Force, he's snapped the first link. Palpatine is alive, contained, and for the first time since Mortis, Anakin thinks the future might not be a fixed prison. Masters murmur as he passes. The chosen one, the prophecy. Some thought it meant destroying the Sith, others balancing the Force, but no one expected the balance to look like this. A living Darth Sidious in binders, and a living Anakin who remembers what happens if he fails. Yet even as the Jedi scramble, new tensions coil tight. In the Senate, loyalists are already drafting speeches about a Jedi coup, insisting that Palpatine has been framed. Across 1,000 systems, clones wait with chips still buried in their skulls. Half-triggered code, ready to finish what it started if anyone presses the wrong button. The dark side does not just vanish because the mask is ripped away. It swirls harder, angrier, around a galaxy that does not want to believe its beloved Chancellor is a monster. And this, my loves, is where our story bends away from the films you know. In canon, the temple burns, the Jedi fall, and Order 66 slams down like a guillotine. Here, the blade hesitates. The separatist fleets are still armed, Grievous and the Council are still out there. And somewhere below the Senate, a captured Darth Sidious smiles, because survival is its own kind of victory. Welcome back to the edge of the fork in the road. In part 2, we'll have to ask, if Order 66 doesn't strike cleanly, what does a messy, half-awakened purge look like? And what does a chosen one who remembers Mortis do with a Sith Lord he's not allowed to kill? Closing the first chapter. Anakin's new path and what comes next. What does a chosen one who remembers Mortis do with a Sith Lord he's not allowed to kill? That, my loves, is where we leave the blade hanging in the air for now. Before we begin this video's next chapter in part 2, we need to look back over what just changed. Because this is not the galaxy you thought you knew. Anakin did not stumble blindly into Palpatine's web. He walked in carrying the memory of a world of living Force gods and a future where he became the very monster he feared. On Mortis, he saw himself as Vader, heard the screams of the Jedi Temple, felt Padmé fall, and then had it all wiped away. Here, by the will of the Force, those memories come crashing back. That single difference ripples outward. At the opera, he doesn't melt under the promise of saving Padmé. He tests Palpatine. He pushes back. He recognizes the cadence of the dark side that once tempted him as the sun. Instead of letting fear steer him, he chooses to steer himself. He goes to the council not as a frightened knight begging for secrets, but as someone who has seen the end of the Jedi and refuses to let it happen again. He lays out his visions. He names the Sith Lord. He forces masters like Windu and Yoda to look at a future they never sensed. And when the moment comes in that office, Anakin doesn't arrive too late and broken. He arrives in time to save Windu, to stop an immediate Sith takeover, and to keep the Republic from collapsing overnight. That's the heart of this timeline. Destiny versus choice. Mortis showed Anakin a possible destiny, but remembering it lets him step off the rails. The prophecy doesn't vanish, it changes shape. The chosen one isn't a puppet dragged toward a mask and a respirator. He is a Jedi who decides, again and again, not to become the thing he saw in that vision. Balance isn't something handed to him, it's something he fights for. But our story begins to twist even more from here, because nothing is actually resolved. Palpatine lives, locked in a cell beneath the Senate, and already plotting his next move. The clones still carry their inhibitor chips, a silent Order 66 waiting for the wrong signal. The Separatist Council is scattered, but not destroyed, and the Jedi are suddenly staring at their own failures, reflected in Anakin's eyes, wondering how many warnings they ignored. So, welcome back to the speculative side of the galaxy. Tell me in the comments, how do you think Order 66 mutates now that Anakin has blown the secret early? What does the Senate do with a Sith Chancellor on trial in the heart of the Republic? And can Anakin really walk that razor's edge between light and dark without falling? Or does trying to balance both just open a new path to ruin? For the giveaway, it's simple. Make sure you're subscribed. Hit the little bell so you don't miss part 2, and drop a comment either with your favorite Mortis moment or your prediction for Ahsoka's role in this new timeline. Will she become Anakin's anchor, or the one who calls him out when he drifts too far? I'll pick a winner by the time part 2 goes live and announce it there. Thank you for being here, my loves. Curl up, stay cozy, and may the Force be with you until we continue this story in part 2.